has spent the majority. Excuse me. John was born in Oslo, but has spent the majority of his life in Valdres, mainly in Olnes, where his wife Kirsten was from. In 2017, they moved to Lørenskog outside of Oslo to be nearer to the children and grandchildren, but they still live at their mountain home in Valdres in the summer and other vacations. John attended the university in Trondheim and received degrees in history, ethnology, and Norwegian language and literature. In addition, he has exams in the science of education, archaeology, genealogy, and English. In Valdres, he was a teacher both in junior and senior high school. But for the last 15 years before retirement, he was the curator and archivist at the Valdres Folk Museum. He is a writer and author of local history in Valdres and has had 22 books and booklets published, mostly about the history of local churches. One of his books is titled Pilgrim i Valdres. He is an authorized Valdres travel and tour guide and has also served on the Årdal Town Council. He was awarded the Royal Medal of Merit from His Majesty the King in 2013. He has been very active in both local and national history organizations. He organized the excavation and restoration of a medieval church ruin in Valdres. Many of you Americans who perhaps have ties to the Valdres Sunbund will recognize his name, as he has contributed over 300 articles to their publication called the Budstikken over the years about history and events in Valdres. I know for a fact that John is a great hiker, as I think he goes on hikes almost daily. I also know he has hiked some of the Pilgrim trails. When the NSI board was trying to come up with topics to use on our virtual Stevne, I mentioned the Pilgrim trails in Norway and was surprised that some didn't know what they were. So I suggested we ask John to be one of our presenters. I want to thank John for agreeing to do this for us. So without further ado, may I present my dear friend, Jahn Børe Jahnsen.
Okay, hello everyone. I hope you can hear me. I'm sorry I forgot you a little because I have a 2-year-old grandson around my knees. So that's why I forgot. But anyhow, now I'm here and I hope you can hear me. The St. Olav's Shrine in the Nidaros Cathedral in Trondheim has been the most important pilgrimage site in the Nordic countries since 1031. The Norwegian Saint King kept his status as the most esteemed Nordic saint throughout the Middle Ages. The Norwegian King Olav II Haraldsson was born in 995 as the great-great-grandson of King Harald Fair or Hårfagre in Norwegian. This was important in a time when the country had several small kings and earls. Direct lineage from Harald Fair gave the right to inherit the Norwegian throne. Only 12 years old, Olav was introduced to life as a Viking at sea. He became a successful Viking chief who was in alliance with several of the rulers of Europe, but he also had dangerous enemies. Among his allies was the King of England, who at the time was in a severe conflict with the King of Denmark. King Olav tore down London Bridge using his longships. The King of England got back his country and King Olav was richly rewarded. Another of King Olav's allies was the Duke of Normandy. 19 years old, Olav stayed in Rouen, France for many months at the Duke's court. Though Christianity had been introduced to many places in Norway and King Olav Haraldsson probably knew about the new faith, it was during his stay in Normandy that he was taught Christianity and was baptized in 1014. He came back to Norway with a vision and called to unite his kingdom to become one Christian country under a new Christian legislation. During the year 1015 to 16, he was elected king all over Norway. In 1016, Olav was hailed as king at the Øyreting in Trondheim. He was then the first to be elected as king of the whole country. During this procedure, the king also introduced the Christian legislation, which was fully adopted in 1023 at the Mosterting. During his 15 years as King of Norway, Olav experienced great progress for his project in the country, but also resistance from important people who made an alliance with the Danish king. Olav fled Norway in 1028 and spent a couple of years in Novgorod at the court of the Grand Prince of Russia. In 1030, King Olav had a dream which he interpreted as a call to go back home and fight for his country. He arrived at Stiklestad in Trøndelag with a small army and was killed in a battle there. The St. Olav saga, written by the Icelandic historian Snorri Sturlason, tells about miracles that occurred at the battle scene and later around the king's grave in Trondheim. And Anne, would you please put up picture number 1 on the screen? Yes, here you can see the king in an old drawing being killed at the Battle of Stiklestad. People started to think that he was a holy man, and 1 year later, they convinced the bishop to open the grave. The king looked like he had been sleeping. His hair and nails had grown. His skin was fresh and a wonderful odor came from the coffin. The king was declared a martyr and a saint in the year 1031. The relics were placed in the church and the pilgrimages to the Holy King's relics started immediately. Okay, you can take away the picture now. In 1153, the Archbishopric of Nidaros was established by the Pope, and the second Archbishop, Eystein Erlendsson, started building the Cathedral of Nidaros in Trondheim. Archbishop Eystein had studied in France and England and was familiar with the architecture of the European cathedrals. He brought both the knowledge and the stonemasons to Trondheim. Archbishop Eystein was an important person for the veneration of Saint Olav. He wrote a book about the life and miracles of Saint Olav, Passio et Miraculi Beati Olavi. The book was spread and copied all over Northern Europe. A pilgrim was traditionally a person who, for religious reasons, travels to a place that in his or her religion is regarded as holy. The word pilgrim comes of the Latin word peregrinus, meaning a stranger or a foreigner. Further back, the Latin word comes of per agro, meaning through the field. Probably the stranger came walking through the field, and it's easy to recognize the word agriculture. In medieval times, the pilgrim could be just someone walking from place to place. The pilgrim's motivation can be a spiritual purification, gratitude combined with a promise to worship a god or a saint there, or a wish to be part of the special blessing at this place. All world religions have such holy places, but only in Islam the pilgrimage is a command. A thank you for being healed or a hope to be healed for illnesses is often mentioned as a motivation for going on the pilgrimage. But you had to pray wholeheartedly. A legend from Valdres illustrates this. A rich but blind lady rode to the pilgrim church with her companions. When they told her they could see the church, she got her eyesight back. Then the rich lady thought she could save the gift she had meant to give to the church, and she turned back towards her home. But she had not come far before she was blind again. and it did not help her that she now rode all the way to the church and gave a far larger gift than she had originally planned. So pray wholeheartedly. The goal or site of a pilgrimage can be anything from the nature or a building, even a city or a whole country. Some pilgrimages can be traced back to prehistoric times, but may have turned into a new concept through history. Other pilgrimages may have been established by a prophet, a saint, or a church, or when a saint or prophet have shown themselves at a specific place. The pilgrimage is marked by the temporary annulment of the daily social connections, which is suspended and replaced by a strong fellowship between the pilgrims. Sometimes this is shown by special clothes, ascetic exercises, and various restrictions. The concept of pilgrimages has been expanded in the way that a person who travels to a place that is important to him or her might be called pilgrim, even if the motive is not religious. And Americans traveling back to their ancestral farm in Norway might also consider themselves as pilgrims. Most important with the medieval pilgrimages was the goal, the site, the holy place. The road or track to the holy place was just work. One could say blood, sweat, and tears, toil, and add hunger, thirst, heat, frost, weakness, sickness, even sometimes death. Struggling through unknown territories for weeks and months, exposed to robbers and cheating landlords or businessmen. The pilgrims avoided forests and mountains. They did not know the language or local customs. On the other hand, young, adventurous people learned about strange peoples and their lives. At long last, the pilgrims arrived at the Mons Gaudi, the mountain of joy, in Old Norwegian Feginsbrekka, where they can see the goal, the holy place. There they can worship and pray, touch the cross or relics. For the Christian pilgrims, in particular Catholics, the most important holy places were Jerusalem, Rome in Italy, and Santiago de Compostela in Spain. In 2012, I walked the last 62 miles to Santiago with my wife and daughter. Next picture, Anne, please. This is my daughter and myself on the pilgrimage in Spain. Thank you. Over the last decades, a wave of pilgrim enthusiasm has rolled over Europe and Norway. Partly it is of general religiousness, open for all Christian values. It promotes the sense of medieval symbols, pictures, sculpture, cathedrals, saints and angels. It encourages pilgrimages and dialogues across boundaries and religious convictions. Most important here is the pilgrim road or track, to be on the way as a human being, a physical expression of a spiritual process. Walking as a pilgrim can be a way of finding oneself and a way of contemplation. On the other hand, the official church has given the modern pilgrimages a more specific Christian content. The road, the Camino in Spanish, has become more important spiritually than was the case in medieval times. It's easier today to travel. We have modern equipment and meet no robbers. We can walk as long and short as we want. We can stay overnight in hotels, cheap refugios, or hostels. And then to Norway. Next picture, Anne, please. Here you see a map showing the different pilgrim tracks between Oslo at the bottom and Trondheim or Nidaros at the top. You see there are many ways you can walk up there. And to the left, you can see the Valdres pilgrim track. I will come back to that. To speak of Norway, the marked pilgrim tracks or caminos are many. The word pilgrim track in Norwegian Pilgrimsveg or Pilgrimsled is a modern concept. The medieval pilgrims walked where all other people walked, and where now we find the modern main roads. It's impossible to take the walk there because of the traffic. You can take away the picture now. The modern pilgrimage follow. Let that stay there, please. Yeah. The modern pilgrimage follows smaller roads or tracks in developed areas, cultural countryside, or through the towns. The pilgrim tracks avoid the forests or mountains, if possible. There are uphills and downhills, sometimes quite rough. On both sides of the Oslo fjord, you can walk along marked tracks to Oslo. Then continue along several tracks to the Nidaros Cathedral in Trondheim, where our national patron Saint King Olav is buried. And here on the picture, you see the Nidaros Cathedral in Trondheim. Other marked pilgrim tracks to Nidaros come over the border from Sweden. A pilgrimage is possible along the coast, where you travel mostly by boat. There were also other pilgrim goals or sites, less important historically, but visited by many in medieval times, where new pilgrim tracks have been marked. We can mention the Selje Monastery on the west coast, dedicated to Saint Sunniva, the Røldal Stave Church in Hardanger, and the St. Thomas Church on the Filefjell Mountains in Valdres, dedicated to St. Thomas Becket, Archbishop of Canterbury. There are organized group walks along many pilgrim tracks. The pilgrim tracks are normally open to pilgrims from May to September. Important are two information offices for pilgrims in Oslo and smaller information offices along the tracks. Next picture, please, Anne. Next picture, please. Yes. The pilgrim tracks are marked in different ways. In the middle, you see the marking on the way on the pilgrim track to Trondheim. To the left, you see the marking on the pilgrim track in Valdres. Go back, please. Go back. Back. Here now. The markings again. On the top is the marking on the pilgrim track to Trondheim, Nidaros. To the left is the marking on the pilgrim track in Valdres. And to the right bottom, I have also shown you the marking on the pilgrim track in Spain to Santiago. Walking from Oslo to Trondheim will take you about a month. The distance is about 400 miles. I have walked myself the first 155 miles and the last 62 miles. Next picture, please. Here. This is myself having arrived at the Nidaros Cathedral in Trondheim in 2013. After 62 miles walk a week was that. But my most important experiences as a pilgrim is in Valdres, where the work reviving the old pilgrim track started in 2004. I was active from the first meeting. The Valdres track connects the two most important pilgrim churches here, the Hedalen Stave Church to the south and the St. Thomas Church in the northwest. As far as possible, we follow in the footsteps of King Olav the Saint when he Christianized Valdres in 1023, according to the sagas, local legends, and traditions. Next picture, please. Next picture. Next picture. Next. Other direction, no. There you are. This is the Saint Olav well in Valdres, where, according to tradition, Saint Olav, the king, was in 1023. His men was going to a battle, they needed water, he put his sword under the stone and then water came out. And it's still coming out, so you might well call this holy water, the Saint Olav well. In Valdres, we visit 5 out of 6 medieval stave churches, 3 medieval stone churches, and a number of newer churches. The Valdres Track is about 100 miles. Every summer, there is an organized 8-day group walk along the Valdres Track. Everything is organized, overnight stays, food, luggage transportation, so you only carry what you need for a day. Church services and guiding. A parson follows the group, but we do not ask about your personal beliefs. Every morning and evening we have a prayer. I've been tour leader and guide for 15 years. Most pilgrims in Norway, however, walk on their own, not with a group. Information about the tracks and possibilities to stay overnight is easily available. In Valdres, we walk in silence, even in a group. Pilgrimages should not be a chatter walk. We try to find our inner self. But during the many breaks, and of course in the evening and morning, we talk. And then next picture, and here you see a group of people from behind and in a distance, because I don't want to show their faces. For 10 years, we have had 3-day pilgrimages with prison inmates, not the hardest ones. And these people are they are soon to be released from prison. And they walk for 3 days. And I've been guide on many of these tours, and it's the most interesting things I experience. And the only thing I know about these persons are their first name. Their first name, nothing more. So I don't know why they were in prison. I don't know. But they tell me that this walk has been one of the most important things in their lives. And also next picture, and next picture, please. Yes, there it is. When pilgrims in the Middle Ages came to a church, they were supposed to walk 3 times back to, no, there you are, stay there. They were supposed to walk 3 times around the church before entering. On our walk in Valdres, we usually walk 1 time around each church we come to. But when we come to the goal, the St. Thomas Church, the end of the walk, we walk 3 times around the church before we enter. Thank you. We in Valdres have had Americans on our group walk. Our experiences is that you will need some knowledge of Norwegian to understand all the information over the days. To repeat in English everything that is said to the group takes too much time. Important is also that you train in advance. Walk, 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 walk. The pilgrim tracks have paved and gravel roads and paths in the forest and mountains. It can be quite rough. Uphills and wet moors will suck up your energy. This is not a walk in the park. Bring as little equipment as possible. Some of our American pilgrims left after a few days. It was too strenuous. They had trained too little. Others completed the pilgrimage in great spirits. Along other pilgrim tracks, I met a few Americans, mostly young and well trained. The old pilgrims were often recognized by wearing a wide hat to shelter from the sun, a wide cape to shelter from rain and wind, a shoulder bag, and a staff to chase off wild animals and robbers. Next picture, please. This is a sign at a pilgrim lodging. And the sign shows you to the left, St. James, wearing old pilgrim clothes like cape, hat, and staff. And then to the right, St. Olav with his axe. St. Olav, the Norwegian patron saint. Today, we usually have modern clothes and backpacks, but still I usually use a broad hat and staff. They have followed me over my many pilgrimages. Although I can enjoy listening to a church service, I feel that pilgrimages is my church, and you should try it yourself once. And then the last picture. I'll tell you a little story about that. The last picture, please. This is about pilgrim friendship. The guy to the left, his name was Björn. He came walking through Valdres in 2007 first time. Then he got lost in the forest and we had to rescue him. I didn't know him in advance. Then the next year he came back, and then the next year again. And then 6 times he went through Valdres with the group. And he became one of my best friends, although we lived on the other side of the country. We didn't see each other more than a couple of times a year. And yeah, it's funny how a person, completely stranger, and have been occupied in not my field. He was a captain at sea originally, but friendship occurred. Unfortunately, he got cancer and died 3 years ago, but I still remember him and treasure the memories. And maybe you can experience such friendships on the pilgrimages. You should try it yourself sometime. Thank you very much for talking to you.
Well, thank you very much, Jahn. That was very interesting. Are there any questions from the participants? If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A area of Zoom here, and we can have Jahn answer your questions. I have a couple of questions for you. First of all, you talked about walking around churches 3 times. Can you explain, maybe I missed it, but can you explain why is it 3 times?
Yeah, in Christianity, you speak about God and Christ and the Holy Spirit. So maybe that's the reason you should worship all 3 of them before you enter, or think of them at least.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay. Also, have you taken the trails at different times of the year?
Mostly in the summertime, but over the later years, I have made some long walks in September, because then there are not so many other people walking. I like walking alone to think more, not being, not meeting many others. So in a week's time, as a matter of fact, I will start on a 4-day walk. That's on the east side of the Oslo Fjord, a pilgrimage track there, and I'll walk for 4 days. I'm getting old, so that's enough for me now.
Okay. And actually, Karen Olson had just asked, when do you plan to go on your next pilgrimage? So
in a week's time. In a week's time.
In a week's time. And how? What am I trying to say? Have you taken more than one pilgrimage in 1 year?
In
the past?
Yeah, some years. The year I walked in Spain, I also walked through Valdres. There were 2. And then for many years, I walked with the group, usual group, and with prison inmates. So that makes 2. Yeah, for some years I've done more than 1.
Okay. And these groups with the prison inmates, how many inmates were on those tours?
5, 6, 7 inmates. Then 3 wardens, 2 wardens and a priest, and then myself. So it's a small group.
Okay. And Ginny is just sending out through the chat a notice that says the Sons of Norway publication, The Viking, this month has a very good article called A Walk in Pilgrim's Shoes. So if anybody has access to The Viking from Sons of Norway, you might want to check out that article. Thank you, Ginny. Are there any other questions for Jahn? Here's one. Which pilgrimage do you feel was your most memorable?
Well, I've walked through Valdres 15 times, and I think every walk is memorable. Although we walk in silence, I mean, in the evenings and mornings and during the breaks, we talk and meet new people with other experiences. Most of the pilgrims are, I can say, 50, 60 plus. There are always more women than men. But a few years ago, there was a young girl who first went 12-year-old through Valdres with her grandmother, and the young girl came back a couple of years later, 16 years old. And I had many conversations with her. Why did she do this? And I can't repeat now what she answered, but it was most interesting to meet her. And it's interesting to meet anyone, of course.
Oh, yeah. Chris and Dick Norland are asking, what is your occupation?
Now I'm retired. I'm 78, so I am retired. But for the last 15 years that I worked, I was a museum curator and archivist. And before that, I was teaching first in junior high school and then in senior high school.
Great. And let's see, are there any other questions? I don't see any in chat or in Q&A. Okay. Well, great. Thank you very much, Jahn. This is really interesting.
Jeff?
Really appreciate the presentation.
Jeffrey?
Yeah.
This is Chet.
Sure,
Tell
go ahead.
Tell Jahn to tell us about his living experiences in Eggedal.
Did you hear that, Jahn?
I know what Chet is asking about. I don't know your area, Sigdal, or Numedal and the others, but I will tell you that in 1945, when I was 2 years old, so I don't remember this myself, my father brought his family, that was me and my mother and 2 siblings, to Eggedal, because my father was afraid that there would be fighting in Oslo, maybe bombing towards the end of the war. That did not happen. We stayed in Eggedal at a place I found out yesterday, a farm called Gjellum. And we stayed there for a couple of months. Nothing happened there. Nothing happened in Oslo. And I don't remember anything of it. This is my only connection to your areas.
Thank you. Okay. Any other questions? Well, once again, thank you very much, Jahn. This was great. Thank you.
And you're welcome to join us anytime. And I hope this COVID-19 restrictions will disappear soon.
Yes, I agree. Thanks. Okay, well, next I'm gonna see if our Oli has any jokes. So, George, any jokes for us today?
Oh, you want more than one?
Of course.
Oh, oh yeah. Well, anyway, Lars and Hilda, they were out on a date. They were riding around. Finally, Lars asked Hilda, "Would you marry me?" Oh, and Hilda said yes. So they drove around for 2 more hours and not another word was said. Finally, Hilda asked Lars, "Don't you have anything else to say?" Lars said, "I think I said enough already."
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Do you have another one?
Not that I can think of right
Okay.
off the top.
Well, that's perfectly fine too. So thank you very much. And thank you everybody for attending our first session today. We will have another session at 1 p.m. Central Time. Adjust that for your own time zone location. And we will have a presentation on the Family Search Norway wiki page. So that's going to be a very, very insightful and important presentation this afternoon. So hope to see you all then. And I'll let you go at this point. Thank you very much, everyone.